What's up, everyone? It's Ben Decker. Welcome to the Modern Spirituality Show, and I can't wait to introduce you to today's guest. Her name is Martissa Williams. She's a radical Black, queer, femme, and lifelong student of joy and suffering. She's the founder of Nekkid, Nekkid, which is the only way to pronounce naked. Nekkid.
Okay.
A home for making anti-oppression a daily practice, which is incredible. We're going to go more into that today. Her praxis was formed at the intersections of her spiritual faith, queer identity, the Black liberation struggle, and ancestral connection. While studying gender, sexuality, and women's studies at the University of Rochester, Martissa fell deeply in love with yogic philosophy and the embodiment practice of asana. Fascinated by social and spiritual liberation, Martissa became a 200-hour registered yoga teacher and set out to assist her community in their own liberation efforts, which is amazing. Such a good story, such a good woman. You radiate such good energy when you're doing it. Let me get this last line in. Collective liberation born from radical love is at the root of all of her work and longing, which is incredible. This is amazing. Thank you for being here. Please welcome Martissa Williams.
Thank you, Ben. I'm so happy to be here and to get to chat with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So how did we originally meet? Do you remember that?
Yeah, so we met at Rhythmia.
Yes.
Last year about this time, actually. And you were speaking and you were amazing. And I think we just like connected at a conversation on our way to like lunch one day.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was good.
Yeah. How was your experience on the medicine and everything that week?
Yeah. So that was my first time with Mama Aya. And my Lord, it's always interesting when people ask me like, how was your experience on Aya? I'm like, how do I even articulate?
I know. I'm like, why did I even ask that? It's like such a,
Right.
I've never done an ayahuasca question.
Yeah, no, it's good because it's like, especially for folks who haven't done the medicine before, and even for those of us who have and done it multiple times, it's such a sacred connection to be able to, the folks who haven't done it are like so curious, right? And there's a level of their spirit that feels called to the awakening that occurs, that they've been heard that occurs. And for those of us who have done it, asking others, we're like, yes, you're part of the fam. We have this connection over the shared experience. It was amazing. I mean, for me, I went there with the awareness that there was some ancestral trauma. That was the original awareness that I had. There's such ancestral trauma that needed my attention, and that I was living out cycles that I did not feel were mine. And I got clarification around that, and also a deep connection to my ancestors, where ever since they have not stopped talking to me and walking with me in my present awareness. And so I feel so grateful to the medicine. I feel Mama Aya with me all the time now. And so I feel like it opened me up to the spirit realm in a way that I was very afraid to even go into before.
Wow. Yeah, that's huge. And so has that informed the work that you're doing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will share a small part of my experience in that goes into this work. This was actually on breath work before taking the medicine. The facilitator was prompting the different questions, and I'm in the breath work, doing my breathing, my vision and everything is shifting, my body is doing craziness. Yeah. And you're like, oh my goodness. And there was a very, very long and strong vision that I had straight on oxygen, no Aya in my system yet, where I was surrounded by my ancestors. Well, I was surrounded by the 4 women that raised me. And at that time, 3 of them were still in the realm of the living. I was surrounded by them and then portaled into a line with the rest of my ancestors where I was standing in front. And they all in unison said, you have become someone that we're proud of.
Wow.
I had a deep vision of my spirit babies in my womb, and then all of the beings that will be here after me. And for me, I got this clear understanding that the work that I do in the world, the way that I am in the world, or strive to be, because it's not consistent all the time, the way that I strive to be is in deep alignment with the work of my ancestors. And I knew that having a Black feminist praxis being the grounding foundation and the birthplace of this work, but it was such deep clarification from my ancestors who were showing up with me and in my psyche to also reflect that as well.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay, so something that we were talking about before we started recording ties into this, I think. The ancestral work is so much about the way our collective, the different, our race, our nation, our particular, tribe or community that our ancestors came from or sprouted from, the regions that they were in, the cultures that influenced that, the wars and the conflicts and natural disasters and everything that informed the way that they lived and interacted with each other. It all lives on in us now, and
Absolutely.
I think that, for me as a white person, I was really, really raised in the awareness of race being an issue. But I remember being, from a young age, sort of being taught that it was no longer an issue, that it was like something that happened in the past. And it was like this big embarrassing fuck up, that we're all super embarrassed and ashamed of. And we're doing everything we can to pretend never happened.
Yeah.
And so we're now learning that clearly that's not the case. A lot of people already knew that. Some of us had to learn it over the last 10 years or so, that's definitely not the case, that racism is something that has infiltrated human consciousness and has not ever gone anywhere. It may have gone behind smoke and mirrors, behind a PR campaign, underground, but just as homophobia hasn't gone anywhere, just as sexism has and misogyny haven't gone anywhere, just as the domination over children, abusive nature hasn't gone anywhere, racism has not gone anywhere. And so that's why I think it's so incredible and crucial that you're doing the anti-oppression work that you're doing. And so something I wanted to ask is this work taught from a perspective that is particularly for people of color, or is it also for the white audience?
Yeah, so I'm very clear that my work is for everyone who feels called to it. Primarily my audience has been white folks, honestly, because so many Black folks are like, man, I don't need a lot of this stuff, and I have feelings about that. And I think that there's ways that all of us need to be doing the unlearning work of anti-oppression. But especially in the last few years, I have seen so many of my white peers feeling very, very drawn and called to this work, because especially in the pandemic age, where we're seeing so clearly the ways that our systems have been built and how they have not been built with us in mind, all of us in mind. It's super apparent and it's in our faces, and it feels urgent as it is. And so, my work is for everyone, because again, it's about collective. For me, it's about collective liberation. There is no liberation if one of us is free. There is no liberation if one race has access to their joy, their peace, their pleasure, and then all the basic needs. That's not collective liberation. We have to get free together. And I know that on a metaphysical level. That comes from the spiritual part of my lineage, right? So that's why I conduct my work in the way that it does. And that is not to say that work just for white folks isn't important, or work just for Black folks, or just for Hispanic folks. That doesn't say that that's not important. Right. I think that we need to be doing our healing work in our own communities, so it's safe and so that we can grow out of it. But it's important for us to grow out of it because we're on this planet together.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And for white people, there was an issue where we were filming a reality show. There was a group of us, and one of the guys on the show, big white guy, and one of the women on the show, Black woman, they had like a disagreement about something. And he believed that he was being sensitive. And it was clear to see she was really bothered by what he was saying. And unfortunately for him and for her, that this was all on camera. And so, we were in a really interesting situation where I was watching it play out. And it's like one of those moments where time kind of stops. And you know that this is like a moment that you've pretty much been prepared for. And how are you going to show up in this moment? And what came through was essentially pulling him aside and kind of having a moment with him, and just having that moment be about when someone is the one with the trauma, whether it's this lifetime, past life, ancestral trauma, collective trauma, personalized or collective, whatever, they're the ones who get to choose if we're talking about it or not. They're the ones that get to choose how we talk about it. The person with the trauma, you might know about my childhood trauma. You don't get to bring it up and talk about it how you want to talk about it, And it dawned on me the extraordinary need for like a neurodecolonization, like a literal brain reset, which is why I think what you're doing with the toolbox and making anti-oppression a daily practice such a revolutionary approach. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the toolbox and what you're doing there?
Yeah, I'd love to. Yes, to what you're saying, all of it. And especially the neuroscience was a big, when I was building out the toolbox, I had been gestating the toolbox for at least the last 4 years and built it out last year. And I had done so much interdisciplinary study. And one of those pieces was neuroscience and understanding how the subconscious brain works and how our subconscious rules 97% of our waking life. That we are making decisions from 97% of the time from the subconscious mind. When does the subconscious mind get programmed? From the ages of 0 to 7, mostly. Generously give or take from 0 to 14, depending on who you're asking. We are downloading at that time. Our brain is just a little recorder. We're just downloading everything we see, how people interact, what values people have. We're just bringing that in. And then for the rest of our adult life, unless we do the work of unlearning or reprogramming, we live that story out. Right. And so I was like, liberation can't just be a freaking post on social media. Like, Black Lives Matter on your profile picture is not enough to undo 400 plus years of subjugation.
Right.
So what does? Every single day changes. A shift in reprogramming our subconscious to be in alignment with our values for collective liberation, for peace and joy and ease and pleasure on the planet for all beings. And so in the toolbox, we walk through that information. What is the neuroscience of it? Understanding that. And then we move into vision, which I think is so, so important. And honestly, as a Capricorn being, as a very, okay, like as a tends to be Black and white, staunch individual historically, the idea of imagination and vision, I'm like, come on, let's get to the real work, But to stop, when I'm in alignment with my values, I understand that one, and I have been taught by the Black women that it has taught me, the person that comes to mind most prominently for this is Ebony Janice Moore, who does a lot of work around dreaming. And my understanding is that we cannot create something we have not seen. We cannot create something that we cannot imagine, see with our third eye. And so if we are moving into liberation work, we have to start from a space of what can be different? What is the vision? What is beyond our present paradigm, as Michael Beckwith will say? Like, and living beyond that, right? So the toolbox works through how do we expand our vision. There's exercises for visualizing a free personal life, a free outer life, what our world can look like free. And then we move into the unlearning work. And I approach unlearning work from a space of let's be aware of the characteristics that oppression has taught us, and many of us is looping in our subconscious mind, and many of us are living out. Scarcity, urgency, perfectionism, fear of the other, many more. Like let's be aware of what that looks like, how it functions in our psyche, how it functions, how we see ourselves, how it functions and how we see the other. And then what do we do to replace that? So not like diving into like the shadow side, being aware of the shadow, never afraid to look at the shadow. But what are we replacing? What are we practicing? If I'm unlearning scarcity, then that means I need to be practicing abundance and enoughness, right? And so that's what each section of the unlearn is, one of those characteristics, what we're unlearning, and then what we're practicing as part of our unlearning process of that. Love that. Yeah. And then we have a section about embodiment, which is all about how am I using my time? Where is my focus? Where am I placing my money? Like the actual everyday, how am I in alignment with my values? What are my values? Am I clear about that? Am I in alignment with those things? And then the piece that I think I feel, I don't want to say the most passionate about, but I think is maybe the most unique about the toolbox is the library of presence practices. So I have this background in yoga. I have this background in meditation. And for me, it's like, how do you make change? You make change in the present moment. Exactly. Wow. That's it. And so if we are not acquainted with how to come back into the present moment over and over and over again, we will never make change. Because again, we're looping on old programs. So coming back into the present moment is a practice, I think, that liberation starts at. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love what you're doing. I love this approach to it. You started with presence, vision, then presence, then onto vision, unlearning, and ending with embodiment. And that's so complete. That's incredible, really, for any form of transformation. And what I love about what you're communicating and how you're communicating it is it feels very different than sort of villainizing, because we know that so much of this is literally like programmed into the physical body, into the physical brain and nervous system of ourselves and each other in different ways, And so you have like a lot of very practical and yet also very compassionate undertones in this work, where I can see you very much holding space for the tenderness and the pain of people who are experiencing ancestral trauma, and also collective trauma, and the personal traumas that come with those things, and the day-to-day living within those personal traumas. And I also love the inclusion of the
of the entire process, going from like, okay, first and foremost, we have that library of presence practices that you said with the, so first and foremost, it's getting present. Nothing can happen in any way about us talking about how we're going to do that thing, how we should.
Right.
You know what? I love meditating. Haven't done it.
We know.
Love it. You know what I mean? It's that idea where knowing something is not the same thing as practicing something or experiencing something.
Right. And that's why, for me, the toolbox is really important. I mean, that's why this work of making liberation every day, every single day, because it's like one of the most frustrating parts I found in the last couple of years, especially with George Floyd's murder and the outcry after that. And I saw it starting with Trayvon Martin, and like all the other folks that we have lost due to state sanctioned violence. In the age of social media, it's like, let's talk about it for 10 minutes and then we're on to the next thing. And I feel like, I have lots of thoughts about social media and what it's doing to our brains. But one thing that I hate to see is the shadow side, because I think social media has done amazing things for our movements about sharing it and getting the words out and all of that kind of stuff. But the shadow side to it is our attention span is so short. And we're not invested in the long-term change that is required. So many of us are so used to moving like this. And liberation is a practice of slowing down. I often think about liberation as the opposite to everything that the system, it's literally the opposite of oppression. So it's an opposite of every characteristic of oppression, one of them being urgency. It's the opposite, slowing so far down so that we can be in awareness, so that we can feel deeply where shift needs to occur. And like having that presence, having that awareness it really is the key, really is the key.
Yeah, I love that. And then when it comes to the other end of the spectrum, going from presence through vision, unlearning, and the embodiment phase, what kind of, is it yogic asana that's the basis for embodiment, or what does that look like?
So it's pranayama, so breath work. It is asana as well. Because for me personally, getting it out of my body, one of my teachers who taught me asana, how to teach asana, Melissa, she said in our training, and I always remember it, that our issues are in our tissues. And so like moving the body in whatever way feels good. And I'm a teacher from an intuitive space. My interest is not in you following me, but instead of you learning how to follow yourself in movement. And so that is definitely a part of it. Meditation, I was taught Zen meditation. So I share that practice with people. And so it's a little bit of both. So you can choose your own adventure, because some of us are not comfortable moving our bodies in a particular way. And so you don't have to do that.
Right.
Maybe some of us are like, ooh, connecting to my breath actually just makes me more anxious. Fantastic. Then move, so there's just different options.
Yeah, that's so important. Everyone really does come in through different doors and through different, pathways and everything. So having that certain kind of openness is really important. One of the courses that I took, I mention a lot because it had a huge impact on me. It was a program through Harvard University, and it was on world religions. And the very, very first lesson, I've mentioned this a dozen times, the very first class that this professor taught, she said, the number one most important thing to learn is that every religion, and then she said, no, every culture, every community, every single one of them is internally diverse. So when we think we're talking about diversity, when we say white people, Black people, people from Asian countries, people who are Latin American, we think we're talking about diversity when we say Jews, Christian, Muslims, Buddhists, Hindu, indigenous practitioners, but really the real diversity is beyond labels.
Yes.
The real diversity that we're dealing with is so far beyond those categorizations. And that's what was so revelatory for me, was that not every white person is the same. Not every Christian's the same. Not every Black person is the same. Not every Jew's the same. Not every Buddhist is the same. Not every yogi is the same. And so I love that space holding. It's something that I also do in my work. Space holding for the cultivation of one's own mechanism for intuition and revelation, self-guidance.
Yes, that part. I think in like the work is for us. I think that what happens is like once we're really tapped into our intuition, right? We stop caring like about how the rest of the world's got to be in alignment with our control issues, right? Like we stop that kind of floats away, and honoring each person's autonomy becomes really, at the forefront of our awareness. But I also think that like once you get into your intuition, because I think that really what we're doing when we're tapping into our intuition is we're tapping into source.
Right.
Loving kindness is the voice, so there's no need to like protect yourself or do all this other stuff, because you're in alignment with source. You're
Right.
so deeply, protected and supported in your joy and in your ease and in your pleasure. Like, and I think that it like allows you to radiate such beauty, such compassion. And ultimately, like, I'm not going to say I shy away from the spirituality talk in my work. But it's not at the forefront because I want to be sensitive to the fact that all of us are diverse. And I know that there's a lot of spiritual trauma that can occur.
Right.
But like, ultimately for me, this work was built out of that.
Right.
I like got to a place in my studies where I was learning gender studies, had been already learning it before, living it, being a Black woman, right? And then I got to like a point where I was like, okay, there's got to be another way to freedom. Like I was like, okay, looking at this freedom lineage from this historical, political, social movement space, and was like, but there's something missing. And for me, that was spirit. For me, that was source. That was the relationship to my intuition. And so my work funnels at that point where it looks different than other anti-oppression work or anti-racism work or anti-capitalist work, because it's like we're meeting in the middle of the two pieces.
Yeah, I think that's incredible, and I remember when we first met, what I recall that's coming through right now was how sensitive it seemed that you were to your intuition in the moment. I seem to remember we were standing outside of the restaurant at Rhythmia in Costa Rica midweek. So the medicine was in us. So it was lit. But I want to say like midday, maybe before or after lunch, and standing out there by the pool outside the restaurant. And I just remember feeling like you were really listening in the present moment. And I remember I was really sensitive to what you were telling me and the questions we were having. It was a personal connection, but it was a moment where you weren't relaying a narrative to me. And I was like, wow, she's so present right now, and I saw you think about what you were going to say and kind of check in with yourself a little bit while we were talking. And it was just really, really powerful. And so I know anyone who's listening, who's maybe interested in your work, I can vouch for the fact that you're someone who really practices presence. And even just in the interactions we have had, I've really seen the actual embodiment that you carry and that you have and that you are. And I love the way that you approach and carry yourself. You're actually a mega huge superstar. You're like a global superstar, ready to go. And I can really see that you're very well prepared to help people navigate really, really tricky situations. Even your language choice, you lead with the language of anti-oppression work, which is so important. I'm a bisexual male, so I'm in a relationship with a man. My partner is Sadi Simone. People know him. Hi, shout out you, honey bunny. Hey, Sa. Um, and being in a gay relationship versus being single and being bisexual, I'm experiencing a nuance there,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm experiencing the difference between being straight passing, someone not looking at me and immediately having like a slur at the tip of their tongue, versus the opposite, people looking at me and my boyfriend and having something to say immediately,
Yeah.
And also just watching my own brain and my own psyche and reflecting on the different years. We all go through so much learning.
Yeah.
And so I sit in this moment, and I'm aware of the power that you are holding, and the power of your lineage, and the different lineages that you access. You're really, we're in the same medicine lineage.
Yeah.
And so you and I we're sort of cousins. Well, no, we're brother and sister.
Brother and sister.
in the shamanic medicine lineage. I'm also a yogi. I want to hear more about your various lineages. You mentioned that word a couple times, and I know that with your ancestral work and other work, you're very attuned to the idea of lineage. But I can just really feel, I guess what's coming through is that you very much embody. You're like a perfect embodiment of a number of these different lineages that you're drawing upon. I'd love to hear you go on about that a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. What's coming up for me to share first is that I'm Beatty Brown's granddaughter, and Corliss Beard's daughter, and Allie Carson's niece, and Aisha Kenyatta Carson's cousin, little sister. And so these are the women who raised me. Mm-hmm. Only 2 of them are with us today. Mm-hmm. And they're my primary lineage. Their love, their suffering, their joy, their pleasure. I am their daughter. Ooh, it gets me emotional. Excuse me, I need to take a second. It feels emotional for me. I am the daughter of the Black freedom movement, right? I am a descendant of folks that were enslaved and brought to this country to be exploited for free labor, and their extension of their freedom movement, the extension of their joy, the extension of their deep awareness of their own humanity. I'm a daughter of them. I'm a student of Omani Olir, who taught me asana. And I got to learn how to teach yoga from a Black woman through an organization called Yoga for Womanhood in Rochester, New York, that offers free and donation-based classes with an emphasis on representation for people of specifically Black people, people of color, and access to those who can't afford it. And was taught in the inaugural teacher training that was also donation-based, which is, if you're in the yoga world, is revolutionary because teacher trainings are insanely expensive. And so I am also a lineage student of the yogis that came before Imani, who taught her to all the texts, to all the spirits before. And then my spiritual lineage, it's always funny when I say this. I grew up with A Course in Miracles being the like cornerstone text next to the Bible, because I had Christian family, being the center of my spiritual understanding. When I was very small, I got to sit in the audience at Renaissance Unity, and Marianne Williamson was my pastor. And as an adult, Michael Beckwith, I sit in his audience and he is my pastor. Spiritually, even though I do not know either of those individuals personally, they have both been wildly important in shaping both my spiritual and worldview. So that's a good synopsis of my lineage.
Yeah, that's really, really beautiful, because I think that you do them all really proud, you know, and yeah, I felt a lot of power in you invoking your lineages just now, and I could feel presence come in. And I could very much feel what I believe to be your support. I feel that you're very much supported by the heavenly realms. You personally, I feel like people are supported and we're supported, but I also see you personally being specifically, because of your sincerity, because of the path that you've chosen, and the many decisions that you've made on a daily basis throughout your life, and through the hard work of your ancestors and of the women who raised you, that you are very much highly favored, to use that phrase.
I love that you use that phrase. My grandmother would say, I am blessed and highly favored all the time. I can hear her voice right now.
You know, it's funny. That's what was in my ear, and I couldn't not say those words.
Yeah, I love that you did. That was her.
Wow. What an honor. Yeah, what an honor. And how wonderful to get to know you a little bit better. I was raised Mormon, so we used the Bible and the Book of Mormon. And then about age 10, I bought A Course in Miracles at the mall.
Wow.
And but it was definitely me like sneaking around the New Age section,
hiding it. Yeah.
I was like, Course in Miracles, Kama Sutra, astrology, Tai Chi. Yeah, I was like, witchcraft, green magic, candle magic. I was like, how to start a coven, you know.
Yeah.
I was very much like in exploration, and Course in Miracles. You know, anyone who's not familiar with the Course in Miracles, it's oftentimes bought in a combo set. So there's the text, workbook for students, and manual for teachers. And when I bought it, it was in separate books. And they were hardcover, and there were 3 separate books, and they were different prices. And I only had enough money for the cheapest one, which was the manual for teachers. So I read the manual for teachers like a dozen times when I was 10, when I was a kid.
I love that.
Yeah.
First of all, I just love that you got through it and you were like, yeah, I'm needing to, because it's dense. I mean, it's like, it can be almost as dense as the like King James version of the Bible, you know?
Exactly. I knew it. That's exactly what I was thinking too. The thing with the manual for teachers is it's so much shorter. It's like 10%, maybe even less, like 1/20th of what the text is.
Right.
You know, so, and it's written like question answer. And so the one question I remember from so long ago, before I even understood reincarnation at all, was the question in the manual for teachers, is reincarnation so? And the way the question was written, my 4th grade brain did not get it. I was like, so is it so? But of course I know what it means now.
Yeah.
But it was a little formal, a little outdated, didn't fully get it. And then when I read the answer, it was so impactful for me that by the time I was initiated into the understanding of past lives or reincarnation or any of that, that I had such an openness around not needing it to be a certain way, and it didn't trigger foundational beliefs that were already conditioned into my psyche. And the way that it's answered in A Course in Miracles is, look, it pretty much doesn't matter if you think it was real, think reincarnation is real, or if you think it's not real. And it says a teacher of God doesn't need to take a hard stance on this, because the important part is that birth is not the beginning and death is not the end.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes right back to presence. So no matter how clear your past life memories are, no matter how clear the ancestral work is that you have to do, and no matter what visions you have of future lives or whatever, it's all right now.
Yes. Yes.
And that was so cool for me to hear that A Course in Miracles was saying, doesn't really matter.
Yes. The Course has a couple of places where it kind of says that, and I'll be like, okay.
Yeah. And it's so healing for me, because I'm from a family that believes firmly in a pre-existence, but reincarnation is pretty much not what they believe in. Yeah. Even though when you really listen to them, it's like,
that's kind of what it is.
That's kind of what you're talking about. But what, yeah, I'm like, but so you're going to be a God later at another time after you do all important spiritual development work? Might you say that you reincarnate as a God? No? Okay.
Well, I think like that's kind of the beauty of, I feel like that's the beauty of where we're at right now, right? I was listening to a Michael Beckwith sermon recently, and it's one that he did like in the early 2000s, I think. And he's talking about, he was on the radio, and somebody asked him like about religion. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to butcher the story trying to retell it, but essentially he says that, like, all of us in the future, religion is going to be of no subsequent. Like there's no point, because it doesn't matter the boat that you came on to feel the love of the spirit, right? To be in oneness and alignment with the one of the spirit. And so right now we're just, we all have our languages, and we're all on these different boats to the same place. But it's always just so funny when we can see the parallels of all the teachings.
Yeah, that's my favorite thing. I was recently contacted to be on a game show for people with extreme religious beliefs.
Interesting. And you're supposed to be on it?
I was like, someone referred me? Yeah. And they were like, yeah, we heard that you believe in Jesus, and you do full moon meditations, and you lead ayahuasca retreats. Yeah. And I was like, oh crap, I'm so much more radical than I thought. I'm just kind of a normal, nice guy. I mean, for me, all of those things came through in such natural ways that I was so thoroughly guided, and I was so present with and discriminating about and discerning throughout, that none of that feels extreme to me at all. I know. And then speaking to them, it turns out what was really extreme was that I believed that all the religions were true.
How fun.
I was like, is that extreme? I was like, I agree with more people. So it's not that extreme. I agree with more people than almost any extremist.
That's so interesting. The idea that unity is an extreme concept.
Absolutely. I was like, wow. And I just told them, I was like, you know what? I would go be on your show and represent that voice. And I would allow for it to be treated extreme as an extreme. for the sake of it to exist in that conversation,
absolutely.
And I love that reference to Michael Beckwith's sermon where you said it's the boat that we come in on. It's like less important, So I remember when I moved to Los Angeles, I hated hearing, where did you move? Where did you come from? Because I was like, I came from a place that I want nothing to do with, that tried to kill me for the last 18 years. Okay. Like I came from a place that wanted me gone. Okay. Do you mind if we change the subject? Like, but I also think it's like the boat you came in on, there's a reason I'm here, not there anymore, and but there's also something interesting. Actually, in the first episode of the podcast is a solo cast, and it's called The New World Religion. And the New World Religion is sort of it's a phrase I first heard in the conspiracy universe. Illuminati, New World Religion, New World Order, whole
they got some good titles.
They went there and I was like, juicy, and I dive into it and I start to realize that a lot of these things are written by essentially far right and far left political extremists who really have their perspectives. And a lot of times there's not a lot of nuance. There's not a lot of really like seeing other people's perspective. It's a lot of fear, a lot of division, a lot of like projections. And one of the things that always stood out to me was this idea of the New World Order, New World Religion. And so I started to, I learned about where those phrases came from originally. And they're phrases that are coined by women, that are coined most sources tether them to Helena Blavatsky and Alice Bailey, who are women who use those words completely differently than these conspiracy theories are using them. But you can see that these women, Alice Bailey and Helena Blavatsky, are considered by far right Christian extremist groups. They're considered like these huge evil witches, basically. But Illuminati referred to a secret society. This is how they describe it: a secret society that does not exist in the material world, but only in the spirit of all the awakened ones who are ruling the evolutionary advancement of humanity. A little different than a conspiracy theory about people like sacrificing babies and taking over the planet and all that kind of thing, and then the New World Order is this big scary phrase that we're hearing. New World Order is this totalitarian move where it's going to, no, dude, that's the old world order. Did you miss it? That's the old world order. That's what they've been doing. That's nothing new. That's the old world order. And when they coined this phrase, the New World Order, they specifically say the true New World Order will be a recalibration to the natural order, where people will have a natural sense of equality, will have a different kind of intimacy with nature and with the animal kingdom. And it cannot be a totalitarian New World Order.
Yes. I mean, that awareness is so deep in us right now, like in this moment. It's so funny. I'm in the process of curating an anthology. I think I remember talking to you about this when we were in Rhythmia, and like, having my contributors are all in their own worlds creating for this anthology. But that's the theme of it, is this New World Order. It's how are we it's called Love Notes for Revolution. And thank you. And it's like, how are we writing to the individual that is in the midst of the gestation and the death and the gestation of the new world, of the death of the old world, moving into the new world, and in this weird limbo space that we find ourselves, because the old has got to die. That is how nature works. Is on the cycle, and it's scary. But it's so you know, it's so possible too.
It's inevitable, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And what's interesting about it is this, I love the analogy and metaphor of giving birth. You know, there's so much to that. And the idea of one thing needing to die in order for a new thing to be born in its place reminds me of how, you know, the baby teeth have to fall out in order for the mature teeth to grow in. And when we look at collective humanity, we're not adults collectively. We're not mature, clear thinking, communicating adults. You know, years ago, I was going through a bad breakup, and a woman, one of my friends at the time, who I had been seeing quite a bit of, Catherine Woodward Thomas, she wrote Conscious Uncoupling and Calling in the One. So 2 relationship books. And she said, you know, whatever you do in this breakup, is a gift to the collective unconscious, because we don't know what we're doing. We collectively have not figured out love and sex and relationships.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's like watching how we as a collective have to grow up. We've got to become the adults in the room that we thought were already there. We like sort of thought there were already adults in the room. And they're like technically have been, but some of them have been creepers, and some of them have been clueless, and some of them have been lied to, and it caused their conditioning to have them operate under completely false premises. And it's created a massively toxic environment where humanity has become like delinquent juveniles. Only these juveniles are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s,
80s,
plus 80s, and they control massive resources. I was having a moment driving today, and I was like, wow, we all just agreed this is as good as it gets, cars. It's like,
I
wow.
think that about lots of things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I just often, I mean, I had that moment over and over and over again, working my most recent 9 to 5, where I'm like, wow, this is what we decided was the pinnacle of our purpose, was clocking in Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, to work for corporations. That's what we decided was the most important thing.
And these corporations are doing things we pretty much don't agree with mostly.
Yeah.
If I was in a meeting at like Procter and Gamble, and they were like, okay, so how do you feel about our toothpaste and like where we get our packaging and everything? I'd be like, well, it's like problematic.
Yeah.
You know, and I totally respect and get that when you do anything on a large scale and there's millions of people that need toothpaste. I get that when you're trying to get all of humanity's teeth brushed, you know, you've got some, you know, some stuff to really look at, you know, but there is such an important reset happening. And I think that the anti-oppression work that you're doing is literally ushering in the consciousness that will allow for the new ideas that will be foundational to a new world order, a new era.
I think that it comes back to, you know, Procter and Gamble, for example. We're picking on them right now.
Sorry.
But like, you know, it comes back to, if your vision, going back to the toolbox, is that, well, in order to do this cheaply and fast, then that means we got to use all this plastic, and we've got to use all these fossil fuels, and da-da-da-da-da. Well, what if your vision is that my goal is to get the nation's teeth clean, but it's to do that in the most helpful, in alignment with the nature's cycles as possible? Then it still becomes possible that you can do that thing, but with a different bottom line. And I think that that's where it's like, it's just that we have to be thinking about how we're doing it. It's so funny. I was having this conversation with my last boss at this job when I was like, I have to transition out of this, because I was like, it's not that what you're doing is wrong. It's that your vision is off. and is not in alignment with what you say it is in alignment with. It's
Mm.
about getting creative. And I really feel like so many of our things, we think that we're always like, well, if we go back into this new world order, we all got to go back onto the farm and we all got to have our own milk cows and which I do want. But, it doesn't have to be that extreme. It could be, but It doesn't have to be that extreme if we get radical about our vision. It's our vision that must be radical. And where we are putting our focus, where we are expanding our imagination, that is what has to change so it can lead us into this new world.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that so much. The imagination is everything. It's the only thing that's even going to open up those new neural pathways to even check if any of these options are even really there. If you're not taking the time to imagine what that could really be, you're not part of it. Absolutely. You will not be part of it, and it will not be happening, but if we open our minds up and our imagination, they say when the caterpillar wraps itself up in its chrysalis, and all the aspects of that caterpillar have to completely deconstruct into like an ooze. They say that in that ooze, the imaginal cells are activated, and the template for the butterfly wings start to unfold through there. And it's like the metaphor works in these moments of presence, where we're intentional about our thoughts. And we get into that visionary state where we say, what does it really, really, really look like in the best case scenario? And then how do I get there?
Yes.
Deepak Chopra wrote a children's book, and I remember one part of it where he says, imagine that thing that you're creating. It's Merlin who's saying it. It's a wizard who's saying it. Imagine that thing that you want, and then live your life backwards from that moment, as a wizard does. And every step of the way starts to make more sense. But along the way, your vision is going to change because you're practicing staying so present. And so going from manufacturing toothpaste that has toxic additives in it, that's toxifying water supplies, that's utilizing a lot of plastics, those kinds of things, going from that to something else, you're never going to do it unless you start to first give a shit. You first have to care enough to even have the thought that, what could that be like?
Yeah.
Totally biodegradable packaging, where and our standards for what is biodegradable are like non-existent. It's like, this will biodegrade in 30 to 50 years. Like, thing I used for 2 months, 30 to 50 years, that doesn't count. That doesn't count. Meanwhile, other things were like, wow, that's going to be here for 11 million years.
Right.
So, but yeah, I love your approach. I love that it begins with the imagination, and it begins with presence, and then getting into that vision. And then from that vision, unlearning that which created the problems that we are surrounded by, and then bringing it into the fascia of the body. So often the body is referred to as the unconscious, where the unconscious lives. The issues are in the tissues, like you said.
Yeah.
And so through that embodiment, we're literally reestablishing the unconscious mind, where 97% of our decisions are made.
Yes.
Love that work so much. Okay, so where can we find you, and how can we support you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram, on my website at letsgetnekkid.com. That's LETSGETNEKKID.com, and then put an @sign if you're going on Instagram. And I think on TikTok too. I'm weird on TikTok, so and yeah, I mean, the best way to find me is to get on my newsletter. Just go to my website, get on my newsletter. You can follow me on Instagram, but I'm moving into the space of connecting to people through written word, through the newsletter. So yeah. And then on my podcast at Naked Conversations.
Love it. Okay. I'll make sure to put the links to all of those in the show notes. I really, really do genuinely love the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
I think I should sign up for the toolbox. I've got to.
Please.
Right.
I would love that.
I'm not signing up for it. And yeah, thank you so much for your wisdom and the hard work that you're doing and embodying. And thank you so much for all of the gifts that you share and that you bring and the joy and light that you do it all with.
Thank you so much. Thanks for seeing it and witnessing and having me on.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, we're going to do this again because this is such important work. And I know that for you, it's ever evolving and the community is always developing. And as your community develops, you learn more and more. And so I want to keep this conversation going. So let's do it again soon.
Let's do it.
Yay. All right. Thanks a lot.